Good morning. Woo! Full house, sort of. Welcome to day two of the retrievals and data availability track. I'm Hannah. I'm going to be your MC for today, our second day. Today we're going to be digging deeper into the actual practicalities and mechanisms of retrieval. How does retrieval work in terms of real tools and real products? Before I intro today, I want to do a brief share out, just a couple of things that I took away from yesterday. I think my big learnings. So wait, I'm missing a slide in here. You know what? Okay, well, it's gone, but that's okay. I'll make it work. So missing slide says retrieval incentives. And this is about. It was there? Okay. Oh, I'm confused. Yeah. All right, sorry about that. All right, let's pretend that didn't happen. We'll start over. Okay, so one thing I took away from yesterday is that, like, when we think about retrieval incentives, right, we're not thinking about just one type of retrieval with one type of incentives. We're talking about multiple retrieval incentives. We have different customers, different needs. We're really talking and different desired SLAs and different ways to incentivize retrievals. We talked about the spectrum of types of retrieval, from like an archival storage where you almost never retrieve to super hot CDN storage, and then different parameters for retrieval at each layer. We have private versus public, anonymous versus trusted measurements, and then there's like a spectrum of like actually paying for each individual retrieval, all the way to like crypto incentives that are just handed out by the blockchain and everyone else just retrieves for free without thinking about it. So it's a pretty broad space. Another thing that I keep thinking about from yesterday is just like getting really serious about the economics of retrieval. For retrievals to work, we have to understand the hard constraints and cost. I'm still thinking about Will presented this baseline of, if you're storing 3.7 pibs of data, in order you have 18-month deals and a 1 gigabit per second internet connection, you can serve everyone who made a deal with you their retrieval exactly one time in that entire year and a half. And I thought that was really interesting. Retrievals are like constrained by how much data we need to store, how often we want to retrieve it, how much we're willing to pay. And they're also constrained by distance and infrastructure of the internet. And I think these hard constraints need to be front and center when we think about retrievals. Help me understand why people aren't responding to my GraphSync requests. The final takeaway from yesterday that I have is like the Filecoin story isn't complete yet. Retrieval is like the other half of storage, and getting it to work at scale is probably easily as big of an endeavor as the original network. It's a massive undertaking, and it's also a necessary one for the network to be useful in a way that allows it to grow to planetary scale. And that's okay, because it's a giant additional market we could be in. So, welcome to day two, the theme of which is, how do we make all this happen? As a network, how do we collectively take on this massive effort? What concrete tools do we have? What resources and teams do we have? What customers and products do we know about that want retrieval? What are their needs? And how are all these different layers of the network and teams going to work together? So I thought, as a useful, just as a frame for thinking about this, might be interesting to share a few things about how the first half happened, how storage happened on Filecoin, because I was actually around for a little bit of it. And we kind of, the Filecoin chain, now it does its thing. We take it a little bit for granted. It works for storing data. The proofs work-ish. And people they work in the sense that they haven't been had a big security compromise yet that we know of. That's pretty awesome, and people get paid for their deals. It's kind of cool. Because I was there for the mainnet development, and it was not easy. Filecoin took years to launch. It was 6 years from the original white paper, maybe 3 years from the revised white paper to just the genesis of block of mainnet, right? And the metaphor we used during most of the development, which is why I put this on the last slide, was launching a space shuttle, right? And the thing I think is interesting about launching a space shuttle is like just a representation of a massively complex endeavor that's so complex that no one person can really know the whole thing in their head, right? And when you're an engineer launching a space shuttle, you have like, you're one part of the system. And it seems massive to you, and there's like challenges that stretch you personally to the limit, but it's actually only one part of a much larger whole. And interestingly, one aspect of a massive endeavor that it certainly applies to Filecoin's development is like how often you fail. Some folks, maybe, I don't know, imagine it was like a straight shot from the white paper to mainnet launch. Like that's often like, you're like, oh, it's all in the white paper. No, there was a lot that happened along the way. Did you know that Lotus is the second Filecoin implementation? It's not the first. There was a whole first attempt that didn't succeed, and we had to basically start it over from scratch. Not only that, it doesn't even get into the number of POREP systems that we built and then threw out. A lot of Filecoin's development was implementing this proving system, and the way it worked is like the proofs team would come up with the research team would say, here's an idea that we think could solve the problems of the last idea. The proofs team would go and implement all of it, and then the research team would be like, in the intervening time, we found out why that's not going to work. Let's go ahead and build another one. Yeah, this went up mostly to almost to the launch of mainnet. If you have problems about sealing or storing an unsealed copy, just know that like stacked DRG and window posts are actually like honed diamonds that took years of sweat and tears to get launched. There's so much more to do. I don't want to pretend these proofs are perfect, but they work. It's a miracle. It's the first useful proof of something useful blockchain in existence at an L1 level. And what I like to point out is that Filecoin development was like, it happened in fits and starts, right? Like for the first 2 to 3 years, there was not a lot of progress made. And then in the last, it was like a year, late 2019 to 2020, where like it really took off and got to launch. Another final aspect of Filecoin's development that I think is worth understanding is that in the final year, we entered what we called internally wartime mode. It was essentially like the entire organization of Protocol Labs became focused on like a single goal with like full commitment of everyone involved. We moved to like a lot more synchronous communications, sometimes a little too much private communication, a lot of co-located development, and like where we actually would fly to cities and work together for like extended periods of time. We became really laser focused on just make quick decisions, solve problems. And sometimes a few of us like would had a little different view of wartime mode, because sometimes it turns into something with a little bit of a less charitable interpretation, which is a so-called death march. The metaphor I always think of is like getting the ring to Mordor. Took everything, folks put in crazy hours in late 2019 and then most of 2020 while we were in the middle of a pandemic, getting this thing to launch, and it launched in 2020. So maybe, can we do it again? But before we try to do it again, I want to ask, like, does launching Filecoin Retrieval, is the solution to just try to do it like storage? And does it need everything that we did to launch the mainnet and just do it again? And I don't think there's not a simple answer to that, right? There's obviously, we have the phenomenon that we are we're building something on something that's already happening, right? We are in the air. We're trying to build Retrieval on top of a launch chain with real users, real products, real financial interests, all on what already exists. And that there are constraints that emerge from building it that way as a working product, as opposed to just starting from scratch. In many ways, it's harder. Second, when I think about getting giant endeavors over the line, my personal instinct is to go to this like wartime mode, right? I don't know if that's because that's what I'm used to. It's sort of like, oh, if you can just get everyone in the room and we're just going to like not leave until it's done, it'll totally happen, right? And we're all going to be super centralized and highly dedicated and we'll do it. But going back to yesterday, Retrieval is just a much more varied product. Storage has like a thing that could work for everyone. But Retrieval, I don't think is like that. There's many more varied use cases and incentive structures. And the reality is we're spread now across multiple teams in multiple companies. That's okay. That's because we're an ecosystem. And because the storage was so successful, there's a whole ecosystem of companies around it, and that's wonderful, right? And not only that, let's be real, wartime mode is not a sustainable approach. It burns people out. It's not actually a great way to work, and it's not going to work for Retrieval. To get Retrieval over the line, we need new ways to coordinate. We just have to accept that we're a decentralized network, and we have to be creative about how we coordinate as a network to get to an objective together. So I think that's worth having in the back of your mind as you listen to all the talks today is like, how do I want to be in communication with the other people on other teams who are doing stuff in the Retrieval space? What kinds of coordination structure should we have that it should exist? Who do I want to be in touch with on a regular basis? And then the last thing is that we probably have different market conditions for building Retrieval. The first version of this slide is like bull market versus bear market. Oh my God, we're in a bear market now. But it's worth remembering that's not actually really the difference. Most of Filecoin, the crypto bull run, the last one didn't really start until 2020. So most of Filecoin's initial development happened in a bear market. I think a better analogy is more like storage was built under conditions that were similar to like NASA in the 1960s launching a space shuttle, right? There's like there was money to build it, and there were people who were trying to build it, and that was sort of it, right? Retrieval is being developed in conditions that I think are more analogous to like the 21st century of space exploration, right? It's a decentralized funding environment where achieving immediate revenue is more important, right? You got to do it in a way that can make your team money, right? So yeah. This all gets us to the real point of this talk, which is to get in a Regina George meme. Let's be real, retrievals were easy. They would have happened already, but they haven't happened, right? We keep saying, let's make retrieval happen, but is it not gonna happen? It's not easy. We're launching a space shuttle, and we're launching it under complicated, complex conditions that are very different to the way we launched that other last space shuttle. But my baseline message, and hopefully you will come away from this talk today with the same viewpoint, which is that we can do it. In short, there's an amazing set of speakers, and you're going to see there's amazing folks in this ecosystem with amazing ideas and amazing products, and I'm excited to see where we all take off to. So that's day 2. I'm not going to review the speaker list in depth again, but the short version is before lunch. We're going to hear from Patrick about just doing a roundup of the retrieval markets and everything that's happening right now. Then we're going to be hearing from, I think Brenda is next, talking about Boost and the awesome ways it enables retrieval. And then we have a talk from Masi talking about IP&I and how it can help us deliver retrievals. And then we have lunch. And there'll be more talks after lunch. So that's it.